Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Tony Manito. Welcome. I am coming to you from stormy Charleston, South Carolina, where we have a hurricane actually bearing down on us as we speak. So fingers crossed that the power stays on and the internet stays working throughout this. We do have a backup plan just in case anything happens. So definitely ask for your patience during this should we have any technical difficulties, but hopefully everything goes off without a hitch. We are going to talk today about intraoral scanning, one of my absolute favorite topics, and one that I think is really, really important, especially in modern dentistry. We're going to start with the basics. That's the title of this. And I truly believe that when you're looking to purchase digital technology, an intraoral scanner is a really, really good place to start. I'll tell you a little bit about myself as we go through this, but what you need to know is that I'm currently a private practice dentist here in Charleston at a practice called Expertise Dental, but I do have some history as a dental educator, and I'll talk about that a little bit as we go through this. So just to let you know some of the partnerships that I have, I think it's important to outline all these just for everything to be out in the open. These partnerships exist and have existed for quite some time for me. The one that is relevant to this discussion is I am on the Board of Education for Plan Mecca, and we will be talking about a Plan Mecca product today. It is my duty and my intention to be absolutely objective with this discussion, and we're going to talk about 4 intraoral scanners, and to be perfectly honest, there are 4 really, really good intraoral scanners. So I'm not going to try to sway you one way or another, but I do want to talk about kind of the pros and cons of each of those products. But just know that I do have these partnerships that exist. I have been in private practice now for 2 years, but the previous 10 before that, I spent at the Medical University of South Carolina, where I was the division director for digital dentistry. And in that role, I was really proud to help build a digital curriculum for our students. And part of that curriculum was amassing dental technology and teaching them how to use it. And so we were really fortunate to partner with some companies who shared some technology with us, and that gave us the ability to do a lot of research and testing. And we had a great group of like-minded dentists at the university at the time. And we had all these intraoral scanners at our disposal. So what it allowed us to do was to do a lot of dental research looking at scanner accuracy. And so this is a big part of what people talk about when they talk about intraoral scanning is how accurate are these scanners, especially compared to conventional impressions. And as you can see here, this was one particular study that we did, one of many like this, where we actually used all of the intraoral scanners that we had to scan cadaver, maxilla, and mandible. And we also compared the accuracy of those to conventional impressions. Excuse me, I got a cough. Sorry about that. And you can see on that tray in the very front, I'll zoom in on it a little bit, kind of gross, actually really gross. But this is how we developed the technique of coming up with a research protocol that was going to be absolutely as close to scanning in a human mouth as possible. Because when you scan on a Typodon or on plastic teeth, it's just not the same as far as the accuracy goes. So we wanted to simulate true intraoral scanning as close as we could. So for all of these studies, we would have these cadaver maxillas that we would bring out to scan. And for the standard scan, we would hire a company that would travel in with this $100,000 scanner that was accurate to 4 microns. And what that means is that it's basically perfectly dimensionally accurate, because when we're taking all these scans of these arches, we have to have something to compare it to, something that is a true replication of these dental arches. And this was the machine that was able to produce that for us. So a very, very accurate scanner. And then we would take scans of whatever it was that we were scanning. So in this case, it was a completely edentulous maxilla, and we would scan it with our intraoral scanners. Then we would place implants in the maxilla and add scan bodies to those, and then repeat the study with scan bodies. And then we would take all of these intraoral impressions and we would put them into a comparative software that would allow us to basically compare and see how accurate each intraoral scanner was when compared to that standard scan with that really, really expensive, really accurate scanner that we rented for the day. And so this allowed us to really look at scanners across the course of 4 or 5 years, looking at how software updates, for instance, affected the accuracy. How did newer versions of the scanners affect accuracy? So we started these initially looking at older scanners, and then as new scanners came out, we were able to evaluate them and see how much the accuracy improved with those. But basically, we were able to get all these articles published, and you can find them on PubMed. If you just do a search of my last name, a lot of these will come up. But basically what we discovered is that over the years, in regards to accuracy, the intraoral scanners, especially the 4 that we're going to talk about today, the accuracy is every bit as good, if not better, than conventional impressions. Okay, so when it comes to accuracy and what you're going to get out of these intraoral scanners that we're going to talk about today, you're going to find that it's every bit as good, if not better, than what you've been doing if you are new to intraoral scanning. So that's basically all I'm going to say about accuracy, because that is a done deal at this point. Technology has gotten to a point, the software has gotten to the point where the accuracy is no longer a question. In fact, I think we've surpassed PVS impressions as far as accuracy with these modern scanners. So that's really, really good news for us as clinicians, because that means that we're going to be able to deliver better products for our patients, right? The restorations that we get from the lab are going to fit better. It's going to take less chair time at delivery, things like that. So it's actually going to make our lives a lot easier. So in regards to intraoral scanning, this is the question that I get all the time. And I get this basically on Instagram almost once a week. And Tony, what's the best intraoral scanner? People are looking to purchase these. They just want to know what the best one is. They want me to basically give them a recommendation. But the reality is it's not that simple, because we all practice dentistry differently, right? Our practices are all a little bit different. Our patient populations, what materials we use, what laboratories we use, the techniques that we utilize, it's all different throughout all our practices. And it's kind of the same thing as asking somebody, hey, what's the best car to buy, right? Well, it's going to be different for each of us. If I had 6 kids, for instance, I would probably not want to buy the Tesla and have to squeeze all my kids into this tiny automobile. The minivan would probably be a smarter purchase for me. Likewise, if I have a boat, right? I live here in Charleston, which is on the water. If I have a boat and I need to pull that boat around town to get it to the boat launch, I'm probably not going to want to pull it around with a minivan. I'm probably going to need that truck at the bottom. So intraoral scanners are kind of the same way. There are pros and cons to each one. And some are a little bit better for certain things than others, and some may be a better fit for your practice. If all you're doing is scanning and sending, the reality is that you can use just about any intraoral scanner for that purpose. If you do a lot of full arch implant cases, you're probably going to need a scanner at the higher end of the cost market. Okay, so just depends on what you're hoping to accomplish with that piece of technology. People always ask about return on investment with intraoral scanners, and the reality is there's not much of an there's not much of a return on investment with intraoral scanners. The question that you should be asking is, what do your patients want? What is important to them? And if you look at a study that was done at the University of Bern, where they had patients, and each patient got a physical impression, a full arch PVS, and then after that, they got an intraoral scan to do the same thing, a full arch intraoral scan. And they were asked which one they preferred, and what percentage of those patients do you think preferred the intraoral scan? All of them prefer the intraoral scan. I don't know about you, but when I think of going to the dentist, the thing that gives me the most anxiety is not the shot. It's the thought of getting an alginate taken. The idea of all that goop in my mouth is not something that gives me much comfort. So the process of intraoral scanning is much more comfortable from a patient standpoint, and I think our patients appreciate the fact that if we have moved to this technology, the fact that they no longer have to experience that type of thing, the full arch impression. Even using triple trays and things like that can be uncomfortable for patients at times. So they much prefer the intraoral scanner, and this can be a nice practice builder for you, especially if you're a younger doc who's just starting out and trying to build a patient. But I always tell my students, it is not a magic wand. It's not the sort of thing where you can put it in the patient's mouth, you can wave it around, and magically you're going to have a digital model after a minute. You have to have good technique, and that technique is basically the same technique as far as tissue management and moisture control that you would have for a physical impression. So it's very important to remember that the dentistry doesn't change. I still use retraction cord. All right, I still use retraction paste. I will often break out a laser to trough tissue away if I have excess tissue. All that stuff is the same with a digital impression as it was for a physical impression. So the dentistry doesn't really change from that perspective. The scanner cannot see through tissue. It cannot see through blood. It's up to you to manage that just like you would for a physical impression. However, there are some tips, and I'd like to share some tips on ways to make you more successful with these scanners. And I think it's important that you understand that when you take an intraoral scan, how that model is built. Okay, so what happens is that the scanner takes a rapid succession of basically photos. Okay, and to build the model, each photo builds new information onto overlapping old information, data it is already captured and placed within the digital model. So to put this in a 2D thought process, if this picture is the very first scan that we took in an arch, okay, in order to add additional data onto it, we have to have overlap in those pictures. So I have to have a little bit of overlap of the old data and then some new data to add on to that, and subsequently builds little by little until you have a digital model. Okay, so it's important to understand this. And when I talk about and when I teach intraoral scanning, I think it's very important to have a plan as far as how you scan. Okay. When I go into any situation with an intraoral scanner, I scan each patient exactly the same scan strategy every single time. And I think it's important, especially if you're brand new to intraoral scanning, to do that sort of thing. And I always start on the occlusal of whatever arch I'm working on. So if I'm doing a full arch impression, I will start, I'm right-handed. So I usually start on the occlusal of number 15. Or the occlusal of number 18 or 19, somewhere in that area. And I will start scanning and get all the occlusals, all right, first. And what that does for you is it gives you a nice broad bit of data, kind of a home base that you can build the rest of that scan off of. Because remember, if we have all the information on those occlusal surfaces captured, it allows us to pretty easily build in both the buccal and the lingual surfaces from there. So I'm going to talk really briefly about my own scan strategy. And this is something that I recommend if you're just getting started, or if you're struggling with intraoral scanning, that you think about utilizing and doing it the exact same way every single time until it's a habit. So once again, I always start on the occlusal, and I will capture that surface first. And then when I rotate to capture the lingual, I only rotate 45 degrees. This allows me the scanner to see some of the occlusal, but also some of the lingual. And then I will roll to the buccal and do the exact same thing on the buccal. All right, at this point, I roll the further 90 degrees to capture the rest of the buccal surfaces. And then at this point, I will look at the scan and I will see where I have holes, where I have data holes. And data holes show up as windows in the scan screen. So it's just areas where you can clearly see that you don't have any data. And then you go back and you just fill in the holes. The nice thing about scanning is if you turn off your scanner and you look at your model and you see that you haven't captured an area very well, you just go back and you begin scanning exactly where you started, and you can just fill in those additional areas. You don't have to start over. You just add data onto what you've already captured. So it's not like a physical impression where if you wait the 5 minutes or however long it takes for your impression material to set, you pull the impression out and you see that you've missed a margin, okay? You basically have to scrap that entire impression and start from scratch. You don't have to do that with digital intraoral scanners, which is really nice. It really makes for a very efficient process for capturing these final impressions. So this is what I recommend. Occlusal, roll 45 degrees to the lingual, 45 degrees to the buccal, and then 90 degrees to the buccal. The reason you have to capture more information on the buccal is because when these softwares capture the bite, it's the buccal surfaces that they are utilizing to stitch the bite together, okay? So you have to have both tooth and tissue on the buccal surfaces that will allow the software to stitch your models in place and to give you an accurately articulated set of models. So these are the scanners that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Medit i700. We're going to talk about the CEREC Prime Scan. We're going to talk about the Trios 4 and tease the Trios 5, which is just introduced. And we'll talk about Planmeca's Emerald S. And I'll talk about different ways that you can utilize scanners, because there's sometimes people think about intraoral scanning and they think of it in kind of the simplest terms. I think most of us think about, for our fixed pros patients, right? For our crown and bridge, scanning those cases and sending them to the lab. And that's absolutely something that you will do with your intraoral scanner, but there's a lot more that your intraoral scanner can do for you if you give it the opportunity. So we'll discuss that a little bit as we move forward. And I always see intraoral scanning as kind of the first step. Like I said, I think it's a great first technology. It's basically, if you are embarking on digital workflows, the first step is digitizing your patient, right? You're creating a digital model of your patient. So think about in dental school, we were kind of forced to take alginates and to mount every new patient. At least this was my experience in dental school. So we had all these mounted models that we would have to store and put in. I kept mine in Tupperware containers, and when the patient came in, you break them out, you put them on your articulator, and you have them mounted and ready to look at for whatever procedure you were doing. It's so much simpler now with digital. A lot of times these are either stored on your computer system or stored in the cloud, and you can pull them up from basically any workstation that you're at within your office to take a look at, anything that you want about that patient. So the convenience factor for digitizing your patients is a great benefit for sure. And I think that an intraoral scanner is kind of a gateway technology to get you into other things like maybe chairside milling or 3D printing and things like that. Once you really realize and start to appreciate all the power that is in that digital technology. And the other thing is this: when you're shopping for an intraoral scanner, these are, I think, the questions that you need to ask your Henry Schein distributor partner. And these are things that I would want to know if I were currently in the market for an intraoral scanner. And one is the laptop included. Most of the intraoral scanners nowadays are laptop based. So some companies have packaged the laptop with the scanner, some do not, and they will give you recommendations for laptops to purchase maybe, but you're kind of on your own for that. So when you get a quote from your distributor, make sure that you note whether the laptop is included in that price or not. Really, really important also that you know the minimum specs for that laptop. So it takes a lot of power and a lot of processing power to run an intraoral scanner. So the laptops, you know, that you may have laying around your home that you would use for something else are probably not powerful enough to run an intraoral scanner. These need to be gaming type laptops. And generally they run about $2,000 to $3,000. So you want to make sure that you are factoring that cost into your purchase price. The other thing is, are there monthly fees with whatever scanner you're purchasing? Some companies offer cloud-based storage of your scans, which is a nice convenience, but they charge a monthly fee for that. So if that's something that you're interested in, just make sure that you're factoring that in to the cost as well as the cost for potentially for software upgrades. I think software upgrades are one of the most important things that we have as users of intraoral scanners, because these software upgrades really keep our scanner relevant over the course of years and years. We all have that fear of our technology becoming obsolete. But the reality is, with software upgrades, our scanners can stay relative and usable for years. I mean, I have friends who are using Omnicams, CEREC Omnicams, for the past 7 years. And because of software upgrades, they're still able to use those in their practice today. And that's just one example of many as far as the quality of upgrades that we're getting from the manufacturers. So you want to make sure that you are going to get these upgrades, and just know, once again, if you're going to have to pay for those or whether they're included. All of this harkens back to this idea of the total cost of ownership for your scanner. And so you can't just look at the cost up front, what you're paying for the scanner and the laptop. What is it going to cost you per month to operate this piece of technology? And then it's always nice, and I would ask if you have a lab that you work with exclusively or one that you send a vast majority of your work to, just see if they have a recommendation. Nobody sees more intraoral scans than laboratories. And so they know kind of the quality of what they're getting and whether they're able to discern margins a little bit better from one scanner than another. And I think a lot of that comes down to the user, and whether the user is able to use that piece of technology, on how successful they are. But it's nice to have to know if the lab has a recommendation on that. Regarding laptop requirements, this is just something that I pulled off the 3Shape website. This is what they're currently recommending for their users as far as laptops. And the things that are really, really important are the processor. You want to make sure that you have a very fast processor. You want to make sure you have ideally 32 gigabytes of memory. Some scanners can work on 16, but for the most part, 32 gigabytes is going to be more ideal. And then a graphics card. You want a really powerful graphics card as well, because, like I said, it takes a lot of power to run these and processing power to run these scanners. And you want to make sure that your graphics card is up to snuff. Otherwise, your scanner is going to lag, and it's going to greatly affect actually your scan experience. So what I'm saying is, don't skimp out on the laptop. Okay, it's worth a little extra money to make sure that the specs are going to enable your scanner to work to its very, very best. All right, let's get into these scanners a little bit. So the first one that I want to talk about is the Prime Scan from Dentsply Sirona. And this comes in a couple different configurations. Oh, by the way, I just saw a Q&A pop up. If you guys have any questions, feel free to type them in the Q&A box, and I will circle back around and we'll answer as many of those as we can at the end of the broadcast. Okay, appreciate that. As far as the Prime Scan goes, this comes in a couple of different configurations. The tower that we see on the right-hand side is what I have in my office currently. I have mine that includes the design software that comes with the CEREC and the Prime Mill. So it's a full CAD/CAM package. You don't necessarily need that if you are just planning on scanning and sending, or scanning and doing whatever you'd like with the STLs. They also now offer a laptop-based version of this as well, and I think that is helping to bring the cost of this scanner down to where it's comparable with some of the other scanners like the Trios, for instance. So, so I think Dents by Sirona is trying to make this a really, really attractive scanner for everybody. It used to be at the higher end of the market, and it still is kind of at the higher end of the intraoral scanning price range. But to be honest, it's a fantastic scanner. I think as far as pure intraoral scanning and as far as the shortest learning curve with an intraoral scanner, I think this has that. It's got a very large scan surface. So what you see, what you get in each scan or each picture is quite large, which makes the scanning experience a little bit simpler. It makes it easier to overlap the new data onto the old data. And so for me, having taught my staff how to use this, but also taught dental students how to use this, in my experience, we've seen the shortest learning curve with this scanner. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of an experience as far as what the scanner looks like when it's in action, what the software looks like, and things like that. So what I'm going to show you now is an intraoral scan, and I'll have these for each of the scanners, but I want to show you, and I want you to experience each scanner. One thing I want you to pay attention to are the audible tones that each scanner has, because that is something that is consistent across all of the scanners, is that there is some audible tone that you can hear that either changes or goes away if you're not capturing good data. So sometimes the scanners can get lost, meaning that where you are currently with the scanner doesn't have any data, any old data that the scanner can use to continue to build that model. And so you'll notice with the prime scan that it plays this little piano tone as it's capturing good data, and then it goes kind of off key when it gets lost. And it does that just a little bit here in the scan that I'm about to show you. But I think it's good for you to recognize that there is that audio cue when you're not capturing good data. Also, notice the scan pattern that I use, and I cheat because I've been doing this a little bit for 10 years now, basically 10 or 11 years. And so I start to cheat with a little bit of a lingual bias in my scan pattern. But you can see for the most part, I still do the 45-degree turn when I'm filling in the buccal and the lingual. I think that's a really important thing. And you can see those areas where we don't have data are very easy to see and to recognize. And in fact, on this scan, we still are missing a little bit of data on the distal of number 10. There's still a couple areas that we could go back and fill in, but we captured a vast majority of that scan in a very short period of time. That was definitely a scan that was less than a minute. And that's what you'll notice for all these scanners. From the higher end all the way to the lower cost options. If you know how to scan, you can use really any scanner and be successful with them all. So within the Dentsply Sirona ecosphere, there's a couple of apps, a couple of programs that they use for being able to communicate with dental labs or communicate with other practitioners who might be working on a case with you. And the first one is the one that has historically been used, and that is the Connect software. And the Connect software basically is a HIPAA compliant portal that allows you to easily and quickly send cases to your laboratory. So within the software, you create an account, you pick the laboratories that you want to connect with. And then as you're setting up a case, it's just like writing a prescription to your laboratory. You will tell them what tooth you're working on. You will tell them what material you're using. You will tell them what's the indication. Are you doing a crown? Are you doing a veneer? All those things that you would normally put into a lab prescription will go into the software. And then once you scan, it's just a matter of hitting the button and sending it off to the lab. So no more boxing things up and putting a label on it and arranging for a pickup and all that stuff. It happens basically instantaneously. And then you can go back and view the progress of your cases, just to see if they've been accepted by the lab and things like that. So it's a nice way to keep all those cases organized. The newest thing that Dentsply Sirona has is something called Core, and Core is made more for, I think, collaborating with, and I've not used Core, but I was reading a little bit about it, and I think it's more for collaborating with laboratories as far as doing things like digital wax up or digital designs of, say, occlusal guards or things like that. And that enables you to share an intraoral scan with a laboratory. The laboratory would say, do that wax up, 8-unit wax up for veneers. They would share that digital file back with you, and then you could put that into your 3D printer to print that. So it's just a way to collaborate with laboratories or other practitioners. Now, there is no fee for Connect. Connect is a free service, but DS Core does have a monthly fee. And once again, you'll have to talk to your Henry Schein distributor about what that is. So once again, the Prime Scan is a very, very nice scanner. I think it's got the shortest learning curve of any. It does have a relatively large footprint though, and there has been a couple of occasions where, because of the size of the scanning tip, I have found it difficult, or in fact, one time impossible, to capture the distal margin of in this case, it was a bridge prep on a second molar in a patient with a limited opening. That is a rare instance, but there are occasions when you're just not going to be able to get it to where you need to get it in the mouth because of the size. The one thing I love about CAD/CAM dentistry in general, and we have 2 CAD/CAM systems in the 2 different offices in my practice, one of which is the Planmeca system, one is this Prime Scan and Prime Mill situation, and it does just really allow you to do conservative dentistry. And I think most of the dentists that I know that are doing things like partial coverage restorations, onlays, inlays, things like that, are CAD/CAM dentists, because we don't have to worry necessarily about provisionalizing these cases. So it really allows us to be really conservative without having a lot of headaches. To make, and I can understand it, to make provisionals for partial coverage restorations and making sure that those stay in place can be a little bit of a challenge. The other thing is, even if we have full coverage restorations now, with these CAD/CAM restorations, mostly utilizing EMAX, but also some zirconia as well, you can do these more conservative, almost tabletop type crown preparations when you're being more conservative and keeping a lot more healthy tooth structure. So these bondable ceramics have really allowed for a much more conservative approach to dentistry. And once again, if our job as dentists is to keep these patients' teeth in their mouth, then doing these more conservative restorations and keeping more healthy tooth structure available for when these fail at some point down the road, for the next dentist or for ourselves to replace these, I think can only benefit our patients. Next scanner that I'm going to talk about is the Planmeca Emerald S. And this is another one that we have within our practice. And we have this basically because we have Planmeca CBCTs. And Planmeca CBCTs run within a program called Romexis. And Romexis I'll talk about here in a minute. But sometimes it can be nice to keep all of your digital workflows within one software system. And that's the case in the one practice where we have basically all Planmeca stuff. And so it's nice with the CBCT, our staff, my team knows exactly how to run Romexis. And so it's when it was time to get a scanner, we figured, why do we need to add another software if we already have Romexis and we can utilize all the benefits of it with intraoral scanning as well. So the Emerald S is a little bit different from the standpoint of ergonomics and scan tip size. What you're seeing here on the screen is the larger of the 2 available tip sizes. There's actually one that's even smaller. I think it's the smallest tip on the market right now. That really enables you to scan just about any situation. You can even scan kids. You can scan kids. You can easily scan people who have limited ability to open their mouth. That's a very, very nice feature to have. And those are autoclavable as well, which is which is kind of cool. It just makes keeping everything nice and clean very, very simple. And you'll notice when we scan this scanner doesn't quite breeze across the teeth. It doesn't quite move as quickly and as smoothly as the Prime scan did. But once again, you'll see that we're able to complete a full arch scan in this case in under a minute. So it's all about knowing kind of what your scanner can do. That's really important. The other thing is when you hear that audible tone, with this scanner, it's very different. It's more of a clicking sound, but you'll also hear like a camera shutter sound. And that's a feature that's pretty nice with this scanner as well. And that you can, if you hover over an area with the scanner, it will actually take what's called an HD snapshot. So it's almost like taking a photograph of a certain area. So if you hover over your crown prep margins, for instance, it'll take like an intraoral photo of that gets overlaid in your 3D scan. So it really makes for makes it a little easier to be able to read your margins when the time comes to mark those. If you're using a CAD/CAM workflow, or even if you're scanning and sending to the lab, this software has a feature where you can mark your margin and actually digitally ditch the margin, and then it saves that as a separate STL file that you can then send to the laboratory. So when the laboratory gets that file, they have no doubt, absolutely no doubt where that finish line on your crown preparation should be, and it makes it really easy for them to mark that margin. So let's see how the scanner works. Once again, just a clicking sound, and we're doing the lower arch on the same patient. Notice there's no cheeks. There's a little bit of tongue back there, but there's no real cheek getting into the scan, all right? And that's a really important aspect of intraoral scanning, is making sure that you're managing that soft tissue, whether it be with a mirror and you physically keeping that lip or tongue out of the way, or if you're using something like an Optrogate, which will retract for you. And there's that camera flash at the end. I think that was just, I accidentally hit the button that sets that off. But we did that full arch scan in about 45 seconds. So once again, in all honesty, I think the Emerald S has a little bit of a longer learning curve as far as intraoral scanners, but the price point is a little bit less. And for me, for us, at least in our practice, it makes sense because we already have a Planmeca CBCT and we're already very familiar with Romexis. And this is basically what Romexis is. It's a series of apps that are integrated into one software, and there is a cost for these. So you want to ask your Henry Schein distributor what the cost is for those. But you have everything from 3D imaging, which is your CBCT software, to 2D imaging. You have CAD/CAM. You can do smile design. You can do 3D ortho. You can do basically all of these different functions within this one software. And so the case that I want to show you that we completed in the Planmeca software is an implant planning case on a patient who, for various reasons, had lost her mandibular anterior teeth. And at this point, she had already lost a couple of those mandibular anteriors and was about to lose two more due to perio, and she was has a history of osteomyelitis down here in this area. So what we do, like always, is start with an intraoral scan. And so the intraoral scan was taken in Romexis, and within Romexis in the CAD/CAM software, I was able to do a digital design of what I envisioned the final prosthesis to look like. And this is accurate as far as both occlusal and proximal contacts. I've also put it in a place, the restorations in a place where I can visualize these being screw retained. So that's the hope here, is that we're starting from the end, right? We're starting with our restorative plan and we're working backwards to figure out where the implants can fit into this. And so still within Romexis, we can take both the intraoral scan and that wax up that we did, and we can pin this to our CBCT. So now we know where the bone is, and we know where the teeth are supposed to go, and we can virtually place those implants. You can see those really clearly in the lower right, where I virtually planned those. And we can look at this implant plan from all different angles to make sure that we're within the bone everywhere. We can then design a surgical guide that will allow us to place these implants exactly where we plan them. In this case, I 3D printed this in my printer out of a FDA-approved guide resin, and was able to place those 3 implants perfectly parallel. And she is now in the healing stage of treatment. So we're waiting for those to integrate. And keeping our fingers crossed, because the bone down there was really, really soft. So hopefully we will have a good success rate with that. But that is the power of 3D planning and the power really of working within one software. I think there's a lot to be said for that, especially if you delegate some of these duties to your team. It's hard for teams to learn a single software sometimes, let alone multiple softwares that we sometimes expect them to. So that can be a nice thing if we can do everything within one software. The next scanner we're going to talk about is the 3Shape Trios. And really, we're going to talk about the Trios 4. I have pictured here both the Trios 3 and the recently announced Trios 5. I have not used the Trios 5 yet, so not going to really talk about that, but I am really, really excited personally to get my hands on one of those and to see what it can do. But I'm going to talk about the Trios 4. The nice thing about the Trios 5 being introduced is that inevitably it will bring the price down on the Trios 4. And the Trios 4 is a really, really great scanner. So I would, if you're looking at intraoral scanners, I would certainly look at that. As you can see, it is cordless, the Trios 4 and the Trios 5. And a cordless option is really nice, because what you'll find with these laptop-based scanners is that sometimes it's hard to figure out where you're going to put the laptop in your operatory. It needs to be somewhere where obviously the scanner can reach the patient's mouth, but it also needs to be someplace where you can see the screen while you're scanning, because as nice as it is to have those audible tones when you're scanning, you really also need to see the kind of data that you're gathering and making sure that you're not missing any of that data. So having a wireless feature really does make it a lot more convenient to scan in certain setups. So that's another thing you may want to think about, is where's the laptop going to go in your operatories? Because that's a question that if you don't think about, you may find that there's no real good place to put it. Your assistant may be standing there holding the laptop. I've actually done that before out of necessity, but something you definitely want to think about. And so here is the Trios 4 scanning. Once again, same patient. You'll see that it will struggle at times to pick up certain pieces of information, and I think all scanners are like that. They may not have shown up like that in the previous products that we showed you, but the one thing that you have to think about is each of these scanners has a focal depth that it works best at. So if there's some points where you're too close to the tooth or too far from the tooth, it won't add data to those areas. So it's just a matter of, if you're going over an area and the data is not filling in, maybe going a little bit further away from that tooth and seeing if you're getting into that ideal focal depth. So you can see the Trios captures, it kind of keeps track of the number of images. So in 53 seconds, we took 1,000 images. So once again, those 1,000 individual pictures that the software put together accurately to create a 3D digital model. This is impressive technology, y'all. Really, really cool. And you could look at the quality of that model. I mean, that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I really like this Trios 4. The wireless is a really nice aspect to have, and it's a very, very good scanner. It also has some apps that are available with it, and some of these come for free. My favorite of those free ones is the Trios Patient Monitoring, and what that is basically, in our practice, we take intraoral scans on every new patient. Okay, so everybody gets an intraoral scan, and over the years, we take additional intraoral scans. We can overlap the scan from the very first day they were in our practice to a scan 2 years later, and we can really see what changes have occurred over that time period. So if a patient is a wear patient, for instance, or if they have a lot of recession, instead of just kind of taking measurements with your perio probe or maybe kind of guessing, those numbers don't necessarily mean anything to the patients. When you can show them those changes on the screen, it really helps drive home the message that, hey, Mrs. Jones, you're really wearing your teeth down. We need to do X treatment to address this. It's a great teaching tool and a great patient education feature. And Trios is not the only scanner that has this feature. I think most do, but the Trios one is a little more elegant, I think, than some of the other ones. And so I want to show a case where we utilize the Trios at the university for lab communication, really. I think this intraoral scanner is a great tool for lab communication. So this was the case. This was actually one of our students' mothers who came in, and her chief complaint was that really old feldspathic crown on the central incisor that had been there for years and years, and she had whitened her teeth and wanted her teeth brighter, but that crown was not going to allow it as long as it was in place. So when we looked at this case overall, we decided to do 4 restorations total, 3 really conservative veneer preps, and then replacement of that feldspathic crown. And the first step, as always, is an intraoral scan. We need to digitize this patient. That way we can evaluate everything. We can evaluate the occlusion. We can evaluate the aesthetics and the incisal edge position. There's so much we can evaluate on this intraoral scan. And what we did in this case was I took that scan and I put it into some design software and did a digital prototype. One of the chief complaints that she had is that her lateral incisors were very small. So when we were prototyping this, we decided to try to make her lateral incisors more prominent. And that was really her chief complaint, was she wanted her teeth whiter and she wanted those lateral incisors to be more prominent. So throw this into digital design, and then I can export the model from the design into my 3D printing software, create a 3D printed model, and off of that make a matrix that we can take and use for our provisionals on the day of preparation. So here we are the day of preparation, replaced that, took that old feldspathic crown off and did some really conservative veneer preps on the rest of the teeth. Place our provisionals, and the provisional stage is incredibly important for aesthetic cases because you have to make sure that you and your patient one are on the same page as far as their expectations. So this gives time for that dialogue to happen. Patients will they will look and see how they feel about their provisionals, but they'll also ask all their friends and family members for input as well. And so we usually give patients a week or so or 2, even in some cases, to test drive their smile and come back at us with any changes. But when any changes we'll make directly on the provisional. So I want at the end of this, the provisionals to be exactly what the patient wants. And then what we can do with that is when we take our final impression like you normally would, right? Our prep arch, our opposing, and our bite. We'll write up our prescription, but we're also going to take an intraoral scan of the patient in provisionals, okay? Because I want the laboratory to see exactly the shapes that we've created that the patient has approved, okay? And I'm also gonna send a full face photo of the patient smiling and retracted with those provisionals in place. So that helps them to align everything and make sure that, for instance, the midline is correct and not canted. And it just allows for correct positioning of the incisal edges and things like that. So digital lab communication, especially for aesthetic cases, to ensure that you are going to get back from the lab exactly what will make the patient happy, is incredibly important and is a really big, useful tool with intraoral scanning. In this case, we use a lab called Absolute Dental in Durham, North Carolina. They sent us back some beautiful EMAX restorations, and this is how that case ended up. And the patient was super happy with the results. So that's what matters in these aesthetic cases. We want to fulfill the dreams of our patients. We want them to have exactly what they want, and what they envisioned when they came to us for their smile makeover. And intraoral scanner is a nice way that we can make sure that the patient, the doctor, and the lab are all on the same page. And last but definitely not least is the Medit i700, and this is at the low end of the cost scale. So Medit is a very, very affordable intraoral scanner, but the one thing is it's not generally packaged with a laptop. So you will be on the hook for purchasing that laptop yourself. And so once again, as we stated before, you need to make sure that that laptop has the correct specifications in order to run effectively. I have heard many stories of dentists who have not gotten a laptop that was spec'd out properly, and the scanning experience suffers because of it, okay? And that's not the scanner's fault, it's the dentist's fault for not purchasing the correct laptop, okay? So the Medit also comes with a cordless feature as well, so you can run it corded or cordless, which is really, really nice. The one negative that I have heard, I've done a little bit of scanning with the Medit, but I do have some good friends who have given me their opinions on the Medit, and what they would say, the negative of the Medit is the actual scanning software is a bit cluttered. So if you look at the screen as it is right now, you see all these icons, and there's a lot going on there. And I would say compared to the other scanning softwares that we've seen, it does seem like it's a bit cluttered. And for a new user, I could see how this could be a little intimidating to launch this software and to try to figure out what exactly to push. So I can definitely see how that could be the case. But as far as pure scanning, as you'll see here, it works really, really well. Got a nice little tone, nice little mellow tone. I kind of like that. And once again, capturing all of that data really easily captures the palate, which is nice. The only reason you'd really scan the palate is if you're planning on doing removables. Once again, 45-degree angles to fill in that data. And it is also on the upper right-hand side, keeping track of both time, number of photos, and basically number of photos per second. I think that lower number is. So that's a really complete intraoral scan in under a minute that took about 2,300 photos, 58 seconds. All right, but that's all that you need. It's all you need out of that scan. The Medit also has apps that are included, and these, I believe, are free of charge. So it's really nice, especially the one that I like the most is the Model Builder. And I'm into 3D printing. So those of us who know 3D printing know that you can't just take a raw scan, throw it into your 3D printer software and expect to be able to produce a really nice model with a nice base and things like that. There's usually an intermediary step where we have to put it into some sort of software to add a base and to maybe segment out our dies if we're doing crown and bridge as it's pictured here in the Model Builder app photo. But this gives you a nice, free, relatively simple way to put a base on your model and to manipulate your digital model prior to 3D printing, which is really nice. And there are others like the splint. You can design splints. I have not used these, so I can't really talk too much about how user-friendly these might be, but does have some pretty powerful tools if you're willing to take the time and the energy to learn how to use them. For this case, I wanted to show you something that has become increasingly popular, and that is in-house fabrication of dental appliances. So in this case, we're going to create an in-house night guard. We're going to 3D print a night guard for a patient. So we have these intraoral scans, and we'll usually take the bite using a leaf gauge or something like that to position the patient to be a little bit open for one, but also in a more stable centric relation type position. And this, we're able to import those scans into the lab software. This lab software is called PlanCAD Premium. It is very, very similar to ExoCAD. We're able to basically send the mandible through excursive movements, protrusive and left and right working, and we're able to simulate those based off some kind of generic condylar angles, some averages. And then in that software, we're able to design a night guard or a bite splint. You can design it however you want. It gives you a lot of freedom to do so. And then we're able to export that out of the software into our printer and 3D print that appliance. And I have personally been in a bite guard for most of my adult life now. I'm a bit of a clencher and a grinder. And I will say that the materials that we've just started using now in 3D printing are very, very comfortable materials. I think they're far more comfortable and require less adjustments than our lab fabricated acrylic night guards. The only question that remains to be seen is how durable these materials end up being. And time will tell, of course, about that. Well, that is all I've got. I appreciate you all joining me this evening. Thankful that the power stayed on throughout all of this. And I'm going to go through some of these questions now, and we'll see what we got. So one of the questions is, an Intel or NVIDIA graphics card the best? I don't know the answer to that question, but every single scanning laptop that I've had has had a NVIDIA graphics card. So I don't know if that is just what's preferred by those manufacturers, but every single one that I've had has had an NVIDIA graphics card. So I'm by no means a computer expert, but I have spent enough time on those laptops to know that the graphics card is generally an NVIDIA. Can I view my scans on any PC workstation in my office, even if they don't meet the same requirements? So the short answer to that is yes. You may have to export the scans from the original laptop in order to do that. Okay, so if you have a cloud-based service, like some of those scanners do, then it's easy to just pull those up and view them on any workstation. If you're doing all your storage on the laptop itself, you will have to put those scans onto a thumb drive to be able to move those to a different laptop. Can you please elaborate on the 45-degree turn? Yes, I can absolutely. That's a very good question. So when I'm thinking about scanning and I'm capturing that occlusal surface, when I'm turning my scanner, and you think about how the scanner would enter in towards the back of the mouth, right? With the tip going in first and basically laying flat against the occlusal surfaces. When I'm rotating 45 degrees, all I'm doing is I'm tilting the scanner 45 degrees on its side so that when it's viewing the teeth, and you can see this on the screen of the software, you're seeing basically half of the occlusal surface and half of the lingual surface. So that's what I mean by 45 degrees. You can't go straight from the occlusal surface to 90 degrees on the lingual or the buccal, because the only data you've acquired up to that point has been on the occlusal. So you have to do that kind of a slow transition from occlusal to lingual and occlusal to buccal. Okay, so hopefully that's, by the way, there should almost always be training included with these scanners, all right? And you should absolutely take advantage of whatever training that you can get with these, and maybe even try to negotiate additional training, because the scanner is only going to work as well as you can make it work, right? So I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of the training, both for yourselves and for the team. Any tips in scanning scan bodies, and are they all able to scan these? So yes, the ones that we've talked about today can scan most scan bodies. I will say that most scan bodies nowadays are made out of a material called PEEK, which is basically a plastic type material. The only scan bodies that I've seen where scanners have had issues have been metal scan bodies, okay? You will see that scanners struggle a little bit with highly reflective surfaces, and a really highly polished metal scan body is just a bad idea. Yet companies have these. So if you have a plastic or a PEEK scan body, your scanners will handle that very, very easily. Absolutely. Minimum screen size for the laptop does not really make much of a difference. It's all about the power. It's all about the processing power. And also another quick tip is always make sure that your laptop is plugged in when you're scanning, because once again, these scanners take a ton of power. And if you don't have it plugged in, you will find that your scanner will noticeably scan slower. Okay. All right. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. I appreciate everyone joining me. If you have additional questions that you'd like me to answer, you can find me on Instagram at Smile Professor. Just send me a direct message, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Okay. God bless y'all. Have a great night, and stay safe out there.